5 employers from across the country are joining us now for an employer panel through which they will share about their own experiences and roles related to improving employment for people with disabilities. They will answer questions which will offer insight into the supports that have made their experiences successful. I believe that learning from employers about what works is invaluable, and that's reflected in the questions that have been asked as well, and will offer all of our viewers, whether you are service providers, business people, self-advocates, or family members, with a unique and informative perspective. So thank you again so much to all of our employers for taking your time to be with us this morning. Each of our panelists, again, there are 5 of them, have very unique backgrounds. So we have people from IT, exercise science, frontline management, retail management, founders and CEOs and executives and human resources. We have with us David Douglas, the founder and CEO of Ulobi Incorporated. David Geslack, he is the president and founder of Autism Workforce. Mr. James Godwin, Jim Godwin is the Chief Strategic Human Resources Business Partner for the Bon Secours Mercy Health System. Jessica Vehorn works for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service at Fort Eustis in Virginia and is the manager of Starbucks on the Post. And Doug Williams is the founder and CEO of W Diamond Group and seems to do a host of other things as well. So thank you guys again so much for being here. And I'm going to go ahead. I'd like to direct our first questions at Mr. Jim Godwin. So good morning. Hey, good to see you. What has been your experience, Jim, in hiring people with disabilities, and what has been your role in that process?
Well, at Bon Secours, we've had good success hiring people with disabilities in pockets. So being in healthcare, of course, we're very complicated and have a lot of licensing requirements and so forth. So in my experience, we did best when we found leaders who were interested in finding a way to employ persons with disabilities in their departments, and then we developed those within those departments. So we have pockets where we did a good job dealing with those who were dealing with addiction, with autism, with Down syndrome, in a few cases with orthopedic disabilities, and with other cognitive disabilities. My role as the HR leader was primarily around working through the accommodations. In the prior presentation, there was reference to the floor being our compliance with the ADA. Of course, that was part of my role, but also to work on finding solutions and helping leaders to think more broadly about how we can create the setting at work where people with a given disability can be successful. And finally, working on sourcing for these job applicants and the partnerships. That includes, of course, Project Search, but also the Salvation Army, Department of Rehabilitative Services, and many others.
Thank you so much, Jim. David Geslack and Doug Williams, you guys are welcome to kind of bounce off each other. I know you guys have a really strong working relationship, but I want to direct the same question to you. First, Doug Williams, of what's been your experience in hiring people with disabilities, and what has been your role and your motivation in this process?
So probably should start with my role and my motivation. I have a 22-year-old autistic son. And probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, I was at a charity event and I was listening to the statistics around how few autistic adults actually become employed. And so as the founder, owner, and sole decision maker around funding things like this for my company, because it's a family company, it became very important to me to be an example and an example in the community. And so right after this charity event, I happened to be reading the New York Times, and I read about David Geslack and his program, and said, all right, David needs a platform to make this happen and become a incubator that can flow outside of W Diamond to other companies through the Chicago area. And so I reached out to David and I said, okay, David, I'm going to give you a blank slate, somewhat of a blank check, not quite 100% blank check, but I want to build a program that becomes a foundation that other companies can say, okay, you've done it, how can we adapt that? So David and I joined together as partners to make this happen. And the question earlier about, how do you get the hires up in the organization to make this important? I think it actually starts at the top of any organization. The CEO, the owner, they need to own this to their core. And in owning it, they're able to alleviate any concerns of their team members below them who are stepping into an entire world that they don't know anything about. And so alleviating that fear that these individuals can be productive members of a team, that's the role of the CEO and founder. The second thing that I think is so critical is once you step into this, you have to have a free flow of communication amongst your team. So there are concerns because, again, they've never dealt with autistic adults before. They haven't gone through the experience that a parent has gone through, is to be there to answer questions and allow a truly free flow of information amongst the team. And they should not have fear that if the boss says to go do it, that their voice is not heard. So clear communication is critical to make these programs a success.
Thank you. I'm really glad you addressed that part. I know that was a question that people had, and that's something that my personal experience has been, so it's nice to actually hear it straight from the boss's mouth. So David, if you can add to that and just talk more about your role and your background as well.
Yeah, again, as Doug said, after he read that article, which was about me helping an individual at a grocery store, and what I found is that I was spending more time with managers and coworkers and educating and preparing them than I was working with the individual Anthony himself. And I was also at the same time working alongside other job coaches coming from organizations. But when things were not being communicated, I found that some of these job coaches didn't speak up and say things to management. And I'm very outspoken. And again, this is what the article was about, how I felt we needed to translate the misunderstanding that autism or disability is bringing into the workplace. So Doug challenged us. And what we did there at Hartshafter Marks is we helped him hire 7 individuals in 4 different departments: IT, distribution, customer service, and special orders. What was unique about our program that is now research supported, or case studies have been done, is that we weren't just hiring those who are perceived to be on the high end of the spectrum. Some of these individuals have never been employed or have been fired from jobs for many years. Again, it goes to that misunderstanding of autism. And these individuals were fully integrated or included into the working teams of, some of them, 7 neurotypical managers and coworkers. And we had an individual successfully placed there. What we've done then since Doug's challenge to me, we've now been working with Oliver Wyman, which is one of the largest global consulting firms in the world. Gilster Mary Lee, which is one of the largest food distributors. We've helped them just last week onboard 5 employees with autism at one single time. And why, again, that's important is the cost, the return on investment for the company for what we did at Doug's is hiring one at a time and learning and understanding. And like Doug gave us this platform. But if we were going to scale that, learning from Doug, learning from his team, and then talking with all these businesses, that's what the CFOs or many of the C-suite want, right? What's the return on investment for me? So the fact that we can now find jobs, identify jobs that are scalable, that there's multiple positions, and hire 5 individuals, our cost or the cost of the company is dramatically dropped, or the return on investment for that employee is significant. And then we all know the retention level that many of these individuals can provide, or can the response that they have. We've also been working with another large company called G&W Electric, and another one we're just starting with called Wise Plastics. Obviously, a lot of these are focused on manufacturing, and at Wise, we're going to help them onboard ultimately 6, but 3 per shift. But they have room for 100 employees that are temp employees that they're paying a premium for. So again, going back to like what Doug was saying and what everyone was saying about the cost, I think, how do you get buy-in? We're finding that it usually takes months to get buy-in for someone or a group or a company that they're afraid of what they don't know. But the biggest thing I think of success that we've learned from Hartschaft and Marks and continuing is that education of the managers. Because quite frankly, what we're doing is we're continuing to spend more time with managers and coworkers and educating them. And that's how I think it's going to continue to scale. I think in the ecosystem of job coaches and well-intended agencies are, again, they're well-intended, but the education process of how to work and educate teams and managers and coworkers, it's a challenge. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And again, because of Doug and his investment and his challenge to me, we're starting to make a larger impact.
Thank you so much, David. Yep, it sounds like you got paired up with a champion in his organization. Now you've learned from it and can help other businesses, other different types of industries grow as well. You were talking about your experiences, the importance of educating managers and coworkers. And I think that's something that we're continuously finding is that we may not even spend as much of our time teaching people how to do their job, but it's teaching the other people around how to best support and understand their new employees. Jessica is our partner here. She's a manager of a Starbucks, and we'd like to hear from you, Jessica, about your experiences hiring your employee.
Absolutely. So the company that I work for, it has several locations throughout each Army or Air Force installation. And it includes things like a small retail establishment, a gas station, and then several food facilities typically. So where I'm located, we have a retail establishment, all of the things I just mentioned, a food court, and then I'm in a standalone Starbucks. I had the privilege of working in our main store, which is the retail establishment, for a period of time. And I saw, we were partnered with Project Search. I had several individuals on my team who have autism and had job coaches through Project Search. And it was such a joy to get to work with these individuals, and then also with their job coaches. And so when I moved over to the Starbucks, I became manager of the Starbucks 2 years ago. I realized, I would love to work with this program. I feel like we've got the way that Starbucks is set up. We have kind of basic roles that are established. People get placed into positions, and there are very clear expectations of what happened within those roles. And I realized this is great. People who love working on a schedule, who like to be able to go back and compare themselves against what's expected of them. This is like an easy way to partner with Project Search. So I reached out to our partners here, and we got started with the internship program initially. And we've been lucky enough to have 2 individuals through Project Search. One stayed with us for a short period of time, and then now we have someone who started as an intern and we were able to hire on permanently.
And Jessica, so your experience has been pretty recent, and this Project Search was your first exposure to working with people with disabilities as coworkers?
Yeah, I guess in kind of a declared capacity.
Okay. Yeah. And then David Douglas from Yolobi, can you please talk about your experiences and your roles?
Absolutely. So I'd say generally, I think as a company, we're very positive about it and very forward thinking. Now we are a small company, startup. So as I sort of talk through these things, I'll try to bifurcate between like what we're building, which, on one side of the table, we're building a platform for a marketplace for people with disabilities. I think there's value in approaching the marketplace from an employment standpoint as a community, and where, where there's an abundance both of resources and people and employers who intently are looking for people with disabilities. So I wanted to destigmatize, which is, I see that in the marketplace a lot as we move forward. But as a company, I've had a lot of great experiences. We hire interns in particular with disabilities. In fact, over the next 5 years, we're going to be hiring in excess of 60 or 70 over the course of summer. We had a great summer program this past one. And then when we were looking for engineers, actually I see it as a superpower. So I actually do the first set of vetting of various engineers. And for those who are willing to disclose or even mention it, and some do, I'm very quick to sort of bring them in and interview them. So I look at it as an opportunity to bring in skill sets, particularly for what we're doing. It drives more empathy to my company. And it's the type of culture that I would want to build. So very positive stuff.
Thank you. And you're from the technology, information technology.
Correct.
So I'm going to go back around to Jim. Now we've talked about, your experiences, but I want to know, when you were first approached and started thinking about this, did you have any reservations about hiring people with disabilities? And if so, how were those resolved or maybe not resolved?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I've had some of the normal reservations that anybody would, particularly, given that this was a number of years ago when we weren't quite as open to these things as we are today. But the advantage that I had is I had leaders who, either because a family member was disabled or they had some other experience in their past, or just the fact that we're in healthcare, so we're accustomed to working with people with a wide variety of disabilities. So the leaders would approach me and say, I want to do this in my department. I want to employ people through the Salvation Army who are struggling with addiction. I want to work with the Department of Rehabilitative Services to hire people with Down syndrome. And so that's how we got started. So I didn't have to encounter any resistance. And to the point some of the other speakers made, we had some fairly high-ranking executives who had personal interest in being an employer that was open to employing people with disabilities. And the final point around that I'll make is Bon Secours Mercy Health has been around for a couple hundred years, and we are sponsored by the Roman Catholic Church. So part of what we are about and our mission is is helping people and accepting people and those types of religious principles that permeate the reason that we exist. So that, coupled with being in healthcare, I think made it relatively easy for us to proceed with this work.
Yeah, and I think that some organizations talk about their mission, but as was mentioned in the presentation this morning, and I've been walking around in scrubs in Bon Secours hospitals for like 11 years now, you really feel it. They're not just talking about this as their mission, but you really do get to experience that. Doug and David, can you guys also talk about this question about your reservations?
It was interesting from my standpoint. I didn't have any reservations. So my role was really to alleviate the reservations of the team. And when we kicked this off, I recognized that the only way that it was going to work was if the entire organization was involved from day one. That included a union workforce of over 300 employees. So I brought everybody into a big lunchroom, and we had over 300 people, standing in the room. And the first question I asked, and if you recognize that 1 in 54 children is on the spectrum, is that it impacts so many families. And so the first question I asked, I said, raise your hand if you know a family member who's autistic, or a neighbor's child who's autistic. And when you see in a room of 300 people, virtually every hand goes up, it expressed the size of the issue that we are all dealing with. And so I think when all those hands went up, everybody in the room said, wow, this is a huge issue. How can we help? So you know, that's how I kicked it off. And then from that point, you know, David and his team worked very close with my, you know, senior executives and management team around, you know, here, what is autism? You know, you probably haven't been around an autistic person. And, you know, most people hear all the horror stories versus recognizing that the spectrum is very, very broad. And then each one of these individuals brings something to the table that is truly valuable. The other piece that, and it was said earlier, and I say this all the time, when I did this, this was not about charity at all. This wasn't about creating a situation just to give somebody a place to show up to. This was all about creating opportunity and having individuals feel a true self-worth. And so when the organization truly found out that this was a financial benefit to us, here, you know, as an employer, when unemployment rates go down to, you know, 2 and 3%, you have an entire potential population of employees out there waiting to be hired. As an employer, I'm saying, all right, you know, I need employees. How can I get them? And so you know, rallying the team around it was ultimately the call that made that happen.
Yeah, I think since what we learned with Doug and his team, we've continued that of bringing the C-suite, senior level management, people who don't understand autism, and we continue to educate, starting with HR, our first point of contact, that we have to educate the entire team or anyone who have a touch point with these individuals. So we kind of lead that effort now. Sometimes they fully don't understand, but we are getting better at explaining and creating the trainings and the resources so everyone understands what's about to happen. But I think the biggest reservation is cost. And I think there's a challenge here because of we've walked into multiple organizations who have reached out to us and said, hey, can you come and check out these jobs and see if this is a fit? And then we do find a fit. And then we present them the plan and the agenda, the cost to do so. And they say, well, oh, I thought this was free. And because a state-run or a local organization, who again is well-intended, they have made that claim. But then they've also come in there and said, no, there is no job opportunities. And we said, no, there is, but this is the cost. And then we have to then educate them on, again, the cost per hire. We're trying to extract those numbers and then go to the turnover and show how this can be a sustainable, loyal, dedicated workforce. And I think also what I've seen is, I know there's a lot of talk of internships, and I didn't hear everyone's in the past couple of days, but when we offer these free internships, if that's what some companies are doing, I know Doug, I don't want to speak for him, but I know we both feel strongly about, look, they should get paid for what they do. And these internships, we've talked with companies who have hired interns for free, and then when it came time to hire them, it's, oh, we can't hire them. So it's just a sad thing that I think needs to change for this community.
And to David's point, and you know, I was very adamant about people getting a paycheck. You know, you do a job, you create self-worth, and getting a paycheck is part of it. And you know, for individuals whose lives in many cases are out of control, having the ability to have just a modicum of control around, I earned a paycheck, I want to use that money to go buy a new blouse, or I want to use that money to go to a movie, But having control, again, helps in self-esteem and self-worth. You know, I hate to say it, this was a difficult process. You know, David can take you through it too. But from the day we started till the day we actually hired our first person, I think it was close to a year. And I was asked to speak on a panel in the White House for President Obama around workers' voice. And finally, I had gotten so frustrated with the bureaucracy to get anything done that, you know, I said to the Secretary of Labor and to President Obama, I go, hey, I need some help here. This is crazy. And you know, in the end, you know, they were very helpful. But you have to be patient and you have to persevere to make this happen.
Talk about going to the top. Jessica, if you could go ahead and speak on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely agree that in a general sense, I think unpaid internships are a terrible idea. So I'm very fortunate in that my company, every single one of our interns is actually hired in. So we do it as an internship, so there is kind of a shorter period of time expectation. For me, because I have food service, you know, turnover in food service is the pits. It's and so for my neurotypical and my neuroatypical employees, both, it really didn't have, I had no hesitation because it's always a gamble. How long is someone going to be here? And what was so inspiring about working with Project Search at my last position and then moving over was I've got a resource available to me to assist if I need it. You know, how to inspire and get anybody to do their job can be really difficult. And so one of the things that was so exciting for me about partnering with Project Search was the idea that I could have an extra motivator or someone to assist us when a question came up that I wasn't able to answer as well as I would like to. And then just in terms of job retention, you know, there's that initial investment that feels like it's paying off in the long term. And that has been such a great, fun thing to see. And I think it also has helped my non-autistic employees see and invest themselves also into the business. It's been just like incredibly beneficial from the get-go. No hesitation from me. Hesitation, I guess.
Hesitation, yeah. And we'll definitely be interested to hear a little bit more about how bringing this employee on has impacted your business, because I know that that's a really big piece. I appreciate that you said too, you really never know who you're hiring when you're hiring somebody on the streets, whether it's going to work out or not. But you have this other support person who is able to provide even more of that education, like David has been talking about as well, and that support. So you guys are really hitting on a lot of really important things. Thank you so much. And to you, David Douglas.
Sure. So I'd say personally, absolutely no reservations, but it would be, be naive to assume that others do not. In fact, I do recognize it as a big problem. So the question is, how do you mitigate that problem? So I have two mitigation strategies I think about. I think the employment specialist plays a significant role there. I think the interplay partnership between an employer and employment specialist in identifying a good candidate for a particular role is critical. Right, the social capital, the ability to have that discussion about, you know, this particular person, to have a referral, that you can rely on. I think that's key. And the more employment specialists that play that role, the better off we're going to be. And I know for sure that's what I look to when I'm working in particular with workforce agencies across the country. Who do they feel would be a good person to fit for that role? And if I'm looking for someone with disability, that's even better. And then the second thing I'd say is there's probably a lack of access to like what is the right sets of resources or information employers need. So one of the things we're trying to tackle is, frequently asked questions. What are the policies and procedures? What are the guidelines? So if you can make access to that information simplistic or easier, then then I think you start to take down some of the roadblocks that employers have, because they have, many sort of basic types of questions when it comes to hiring somebody with a disability. And if we can be up to speed on how to provide that information in a relevant and timely manner, I think that's another great way to mitigate the risks and reservations that they have.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that some employers that we've met with have said, you know, until I was approached by an employment specialist, I didn't even know that this was a program, that this is something that exists. And so I think that to the point of having, for, you know, the opportunity, the ability to answer these frequently asked questions up front is important. But again, also on our end, as the employment specialists and service organizations, to be doing a better job maybe of marketing, and so that the employers know what is out there and the supports that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be cheerleaders. That's what we're looking for. We need to be cheerleaders for people with disabilities looking for opportunities.
Culture of the business. And I would like to hear from each of you all how the business culture has been impacted by having employees with disabilities join your workforce. So we can go ahead and have Jim, if you don't mind starting us again.
Yeah, thanks. Our experience has been that employing people with disabilities has been a boost for morale for all the rest of the employees. They even if they were reluctant at first to embrace a disabled coworker, you know, we set the tone in terms of, you know, this is something we're going to do as an organization, and help the non-disabled workers to understand and to embrace that endeavor on our part. What was really helpful, though, is as we employed more and more disabled persons, the stories would begin to, you know, float around the hospital. We had, for example, a linen employee with Down syndrome, a young woman who was very verbal and able to communicate. Her job is to go around the hospital and all day and collect the dirty linen and restore the linen closets with fresh linen. We have a lot of linen in the hospital. And so one day we got a letter from a patient, and we shared this with the employees. And the patient was a new mom who already knew she was going to deliver a child with Down syndrome. And so at the time of birth, this was a very mixed emotional feeling for the mother and her family. And so shortly after birth, our linen employee comes in her room to restore to pick up the dirty linen and restore the fresh linen, and interacted with the mother. And so the mother's letter said to us, you know, I've been concerned throughout, as soon as I learned I was going to have a child with Down syndrome, you know, that she would never contribute and play a role in the world. And when I interacted with your employee, as my linen was delivered for the 2 days I was there, it gave me hope, you know, that my child can and will be a contributor in society and have, you know, a meaningful place to work. So, you know, stories like that help to reinforce the culture we're trying to build anyway, that we embrace employing people of all types, including those with disabilities.
I will never forget that employee. It was a great experience, and really appreciate you sharing that story. And I had intended to leave that as a separate question, if you could share an experience or a story, but if you want to loop that in with this, I think that really makes a lot of sense, and in the interest of time, that would be really great. So if Doug and David, if each of you guys can answer that question as well about how business culture has been impacted.
Here, I think, you know, from a business culture standpoint, and again, my company's a family company, and before we started the program, you know, how we operated was each team member was part of a family. But when I watched the managers who were truly responsible for developing the program and working with the individuals, the empathy, the excitement, the feeling of accomplishment and contribution that the management team gained in the process was truly amazing. I think what it did is it helped people even become closer as a family culture. And then also, one thing that I always express and is very important is, we all have a role in our communities. And I think, for the team, this program made them feel a bigger part of the community and how they could give back. So it had a tremendous effect positively on the entire organization, and the team members were just spectacular to have with us.
Yeah, I obviously piggyback on what Doug had said, but there was one specific story that I think is important to share. The second individual hired at Doug's was in special orders, and there was a job that a series of tasks that we found that was very repetitive in nature and was just costing immense time for the amount of team in the special orders department. So we plugged this individual with autism in there. She did it phenomenal and exceptional. And this was also an individual who was fired from 3 previous jobs up until what Doug had done. But what we found was that team in special orders, because of, her name was Maurice, because of what she was doing, they became more aware of what the other team members were doing. Because they really weren't, she wasn't, I'm making up the names, but Shirley wasn't aware of what Sally or Jack was doing. So because now they had to be more aware of what their responsibilities and what they had to check in with Maurice, they became more aware of everyone's role. So I think it improved even the business side of them being more productive as a team. So that's just one thing to be aware of when those evidence-based strategies and practices and the education and the training is in place, it goes beyond that I think that corporate culture, but what businesses want to see is many businesses want to see a better productivity and a return on their investment.
And we're painting a picture of everything, was peaches and cream. You will have people inside your organization who, aren't fully on board. And I'll give you an example. So the young lady that David was just talking about, I don't think we have issued a physical check in my company for payroll in 10 years. Everything's direct deposit. And so what happened was, Marie, she got her pay stub and it was direct deposit, and she couldn't understand why she couldn't go cash her check and see the cash. And, trying to explain to her, well, the money's already in your account. She's like, no, it's not. So she physically needed to take a check to the bank, cash a check, see the cash, and then give it back to the teller to put into her bank account. And so the individual who was responsible for our payroll is like, well, we can't do that. And I'm like, we can do anything. I go, we can either just go get petty cash and pay her, or we do have checks. I sign them every week that go to a variety of vendors. Issue a check and we'll sign it. And so you have to be prepared that you will have individuals in your organization that aren't going to want to provide all the accommodations that you're going to need to provide to be successful. And that's where the boss, needs to clearly communicate. We will make accommodations throughout the company to ensure that these people are successful. So like I said, don't expect everything to be peaches and cream, because it won't. And when you run into those roadblocks, be prepared to stick with your belief in the program and stick with what your ultimate goal is, and make it happen. You can't be wishy-washy. Then we're not going to do this. You really have to believe in what you're doing.
And I think on the side as being an employment service provider, really, you really need to know who to go to. It's again, going and starting at the top, because that person may not have meant to be a roadblock, but she might have just been one of these people, this is the way that I do my job, this is the way that I've always done my job, and really unaware that there was even flexibility within that. And so I think that that's an important role for the job coach or whoever the employment service provider is, to stick to their guns and find the right person, build that chain and find the right person to talk to in order to make that, to make whatever accommodations are necessary happen. I love that story about the check. I had a very similar experience. So it's not, you never know what you're going to get. And it was a very simple solution once you found the right person. Jessica, you started to touch on this earlier. We'd love to hear some more.
Of course. I would say primarily it has had a very positive impact on my team. Initially, especially with our first employee who had autism, I had a supervisor on the staff at the time, and I had a couple of baristas on the staff at a time who were a little bit resistant or not understanding, and it took a little bit more communication with them about expectations and job roles and how we would be accommodating this individual's particular abilities. But for the most part, what has happened is an increase in communication, a better understanding of your own job role. I'd say from my perspective as both a manager of a restaurant and also a trainer, being able to kind of reconsider how it is that I am communicating with my staff about how things are supposed to go has been hugely impactful for me, incredibly beneficial just in terms of maybe the way that I would prefer to communicate this thing isn't going to work for everybody. So here's a follow-up option. But for the most part, it has been great. And so one of our core values as a company is family serving family. The unique situation that the military finds themselves in by moving around the country and around the world is that, their lives are uprooted every so often. And so what I have seen with my staff and with my customers is that there is more representation and that there is more ability for our customers to see a positive and personal component on the staff. I have a couple regular customers who come in and immediately with my most recent hire, just, hey, how's it going? How are you today? Just automatically connecting. And so it's been really great for the business just in that capacity, just showing more and having more ability for my staff to connect with the other staff, for the staff to connect with the customers, for the customers to feel invested in the business.
That's great. Thanks again, Jessica. David Douglas?
So I'd say, personally, from a company standpoint, obviously very positive. It's part of our DNA. It's who we are. And I suspect for everyone that's the same case. But I mean, ultimately, the way I look at it is, if we wanted to solve this problem at scale, we need to figure out, because it's a big problem, right? And there's not a lot of companies that that probably share a lot of or understand the story of how it contributes to a positive business culture. And so I think really the challenge for this community is how do we shine a light on this in a meaningful way, so that it's easily digestible and understood by the larger corporations or corporations in general that that have neglected hiring people with disabilities. And I know we have the data to do that, but really that's, to me, where the opportunity lies, because unemployment rates have been systemically high in this community for too long, and I think part of the solution would be figuring out a compelling way for us to drive that message forward.
Thank you so much to all of you, and I really appreciate hearing about the bottom line. I also, have seen so many departments and different businesses that I've been in that maybe there was that one or, two people that had reservations, but I really have to say that 9 times out of 10, I think that the team ends up coming around and really being better for including somebody, and having this more diverse workforce.